Hello, everyone. My name is Oksana. It's Road to Edoverse Weekly Edoverse Insider, the 45th. It's going to be the additional comment from Tokugawa-san. And Tokugawa-san, could you please start our extra session?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Oksana. Hello, everybody. Sorry I couldn't make it last Monday. I am so many things are happening, so I don't remember where I was. But here I am now, and that's what matters, I guess. So wrapping up, as this is the year-end, the real year-end session, and from last week I've been trying to wrap up what I've been talking about so far about Tokugawa Japan, and one of the most important questions is what was the Tokugawa regime actually? How could you characterize it? So most people, the majority used to call this a feudal regime, so like a medieval Europe. But recently, now people are coming to understand that it's more similar to, let's say, Bourbon France or Tudor Britain. So, I mean, Tokugawa shogunate was established on 1603. So you see that roughly coincides with the death of Queen Elizabeth I, and shortly after France becomes reunified after a civil war, and then Germany falls into chaos, and Russia. I think the Romanovs come to power in the first half of the 17th century. And then in China, the Manchu dynasty. So all the major, and also very interestingly, the Pilgrim Fathers reached the east shores of the New World, North America. So roughly the major players of today's world started to form in roughly the same period. And and then the Japanese ruling class of Tokugawa Japan called the system Hoken, which is translated to feudalism. But the two are very different. Hoken is originally a Chinese word, and this is where there is more local autonomy. And in contrast is Gunken, and this would be like the French system, so much more centralized. Namely, the governors would be appointed by the emperor, and Hoken, the governors are more hereditary. And Japan was following that model. But it was more centralized than it seems. You see, all the local lords, the daimyo, and their fiefs, they were once regarded as quasi-independent political units. But as of late, we see much more unity there. So it was a centralized and unified system. It's just that the movement of ordinary folk and low-ranking samurai, all the samurai, so you see, movement of people was severely limited. So you get this image of small independent units, but they were interdependent and there was controlled movement of people. So it's sui generis. There's nothing like this, nothing like this anywhere in the world, because Tokugawa Japan, the shogunate, was built on an ad hoc basis. There is no political theory there. And it is something, we had only the Chinese model, but the Chinese model is suitable for a very flat terrain, which barely existed in Japan at the beginning of the 17th century. So we tried to modify, and then we ended up with something that works, but was very hard to explain. And one reason the Tokugawa shogunate fell so easily was that because no one could justify its existence, and no one could explain what they were doing, or whatever they understood as the truth behind, they could not say. Yes. So, and then people called it Hoken, which is translated as feudal, but it was more an absolutist system, closer to the Bourbon kings like Louis XIV and so on, but without any war. That was very fortunate for us. And then what was the effect of the long peace? This is another very important question. Is that, okay, so in the period between 1600 and 1860, let's say, most powers of the world were constantly fighting. The North American colonists were conquering their continent. And this is not very well known, surprisingly. It was that the Manchus were fighting the Mongols throughout the 18th century. 100-year war and the Mongols were decimated. So you look at Mongol today, the population is only 6 million, and it's very large. It's like half of Western Europe for such a tiny population, but it doesn't look like the people who once ruled half the world. This is because it really became very close to genocide by the Manchus. So the Chinese are rightly ashamed of talking about this. But in Japan, there was movement of people to the north, but it was a very peaceful process. And no war means no theft, no large-scale theft from other nations. Think of the British. So the Japanese built a distinct culture where people are used to working to achieve their ends. So that's why we were such poor colonizers in Korea and in Manchuria. People, especially the Chinese who lived in Manchuria, were wondering that why the Japanese worked so hard themselves to build up a colony. No slave labor there. So that is one legacy of Tokugawa Japan. And I think that legacy persists to this day. And then finally, so is this a traditional society? No, it is probably the beginning of modernity in Japan, because all the traditional elements of rule, namely the authority of the emperor and his blood, was pretty much destroyed by Toyotomi Hideyoshi. So Tokugawa Ieyasu had to pick up the pieces of the traditional society that there was before that, and then put them together so it looks familiar to people, and then make a machine that operated completely differently from what was there before. But Ieyasu and his advisors went through great pains to make it look like another samurai dynasty, like the two that existed before, the Kamakura and the Muromachi. But the reality was very different. The samurai lords, most of them were acutely conscious that they were ordinary people. They were not of imperial blood. So they're closer to commoners. So in the sense that the politicians were acting a lot in front of their subjects, I think made Tokugawa Japan, that is probably the definition of a modern state, where the rulers are aware that the people are watching them and therefore have to always behave well. So this was never the case before in Japan. Okay, so if you understand, so therefore, for these reasons, if you understand Tokugawa Japan, then you understand Japan today. And that, I think, is the conclusion for this year. Okay, thank you very much, Oksan. And see you next year. No, see you? You'll hear from me next year again. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Tokugawa-san. And, it's a small session, but I want to ask you, how was this year for you? And what do you think, like, the start of Edoverse and everything? What is your reflections?
Yes. If you look at the graphics, you'd be I think you are really amazed. Among the great historical cities of the world, probably Tokyo has the least resemblance to its forebears, which is the city of Edo. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, so many samurai drama and samurai movies, with taking place in the Edo Tokugawa period, have been produced, but you never see the camera moving from above. Not even special effects, computer graphics. No one has ever thought of that. But now you'll get a real bird's eye view of the city. And I think that alone really fills me up with joy.
Yes, yeah. For the next year, right?
Yes. And as for this session, I think all this Edoverse Insider, I think, was very interesting, because I'm just talking about moldy history with my very unprofessional input, and then everyone else is talking about really technical stuff. So this strange combination, I think, is going to produce harmony in the end.
Yes, that's right. I think so as well. Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you very much, and yes, we will meet next year. Goodbye.
Yes. Okay. So bye bye. 良いお年をお迎えください。
良いお年を。ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。